Okay, I saw something come up there. Okay, so we have a lot to cover today. Uh, the world still a little bit chaotic. People are destabilized. So I titled this week's talk Recentering Ourselves. Right? So we have to recenter ourselves, meaning restabilize. And gaining perspective is one way to do that. So we'll go over a few different tools today. If you're watching for the first time, this is brought to you by Existence First. This is my mind coaching company. And so what I like to do, I basically started as a math major but ended up studying psychology. So what I do is I take the clear definitions and logic of math and I bring that mindset into psychology. So when it comes to understanding our mind and the way it works, I think that we need to approach it as an engineer approaches a bridge that they need to build, right? We need to think of it in terms of techniques, tools, strategies. So that's what we do here. Okay, so let's start off by thinking about this. Okay, I'm sure all of us have had a friend at one point call us because they're trying to arrive to our place, right? We have a friend coming by to see us, and they get lost somehow, and then they call us and they're asking for directions, and we want to help them, but they can't really. They're not telling us where they are, right? And they're like, well, I see this sign. And you're like, well, there's signs all over, right? And then they're like, well, there's a sidewalk. And you're like, there's also sidewalks all over, right? And so your friend is like unlocatable, right? You don't know where the friend is. And if you don't know where the friend is, you cannot help them get towards you, right? So it's the same thing with our mind, right? I think that at any given moment we might have a emotional place that we would like to be at, that we would like to get to, but if we haven't first located ourselves, then how do we get from here to that place, right? It's just like the friend that calls you and they can't tell you where they are, like, because they don't know where they are, but so how are you going to help them arrive to your place? So the way that we need to talk to our mind is and guide it is first by locating, right? So what I've been doing this week for myself is asking myself different questions, right? Like I'll find myself in the middle of trying to get something done or having all these thoughts of, oh, should I go to the grocery store now or later or blah, 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 right? And then I have to say, like, hang on, wait. I have to say, wait, let's listen to the mind, right? Some people say, like, oh, listen to the body, right? Listen to what the body is telling you if you're fatigued or stressed or whatever, right? But what if we were to listen to the mind and listen to what the mind is telling us? Listen to where we are emotionally, right? So try it as you're watching this. Try it, like, ask yourself, like, where am I right now? Like, in space. Like this giant, think of it, obviously I'm not talking about physical space. Obviously you're sitting in front of Facebook, right? But I'm talking about, like, metaphysically, right? Emotionally, like where are you right now? So the way that you start to orient yourself is through, I guess, what you could call like parameters, right? I remember one time it was really trippy. I woke up and I was taking a nap, and I woke up and for some reason my brain was like slow to turn on. So I didn't remember like any facts about my life. This lasted about like 5 or 10 seconds, but it was really trippy. So I woke up, I saw this clock, right? And I and I saw this thing that it appeared to have these numbers on it, but I didn't quite like know what it was. Just like it was this thing with numbers on it, almost like a newborn might experience it. And then I saw that sitting on top of obviously what we call a nightstand, but I didn't have the word for that either. It's just on this sort of object, and I didn't even know like where I worked or what my job was or what car I drove. Like all of that was just gone, right? So I had to start locating my identity, and so that's a really important question. Like, how do we locate our identity? Because we kind of take it for granted. So we just go through the world, and I guess the signposts or the guideposts that we receive are just the ones that are surrounding us, meaning the way other people react to us, the way people treat us. Those can tell us who we are if we allow it to. Obviously, that's not my philosophy. My philosophy is about creating yourself, but we have to first describe this process of how did we get from early childhood to today's sense of self. Like the child, like if we were to go back to your 5-year-old self, there was probably some sort of rudimentary sense of identity, right? Or maybe it was even stronger than it is now. I don't know. But imagine what sort of sense of identity that your 5-year-old self had. Then go fast forward to today and think about what is your sense of identity. And then we need to explain the path, how it got from the first one to now. How did that happen? Like, what sort of messages did we buy into along the way? Or what roles did we adopt just because our environment was asking us to play those roles? So then this brings up the topic of interdependence with the environment, right? We could be going through a very challenging time, such as the current coronavirus, or corona chaos. That's my term for it. The current corona chaos. So then something happens out there, a virus, and then that affects our internal world, right? It affects our emotional climate. And then we respond a certain way, and then the environment and other people respond back to us. And there's this constant back and forth, forges then this identity or this personality that we start to then identify with and cling to, almost like a security blanket, that a small child would have. Right? And why would we cling to that? I don't know. Maybe for a sense of predictability in our lives. But in any case, I want to come back to this concept of emotional climate, right? Because what I've been looking at this week is that it's through language. Here, let's look at it this way. The term climate control. The term climate control. In order to control your climate, like let's say you're in a house and you want to keep a constant temperature, you go to the thermostat, and using the thermostat and the furnace and the air conditioner, that's how you control the climate. So now how do we control the climate psychologically? How do we control the climate in our own mind? The way that we control the climate in our own mind, there's a few different ways, but one of them is through language, right? So what's an example of that? Well, what if you hear the word lockdown? Doesn't that cause a very subtle change in your internal emotional environment? If you hear the word lockdown, something. Now this is self-awareness now. So you hear the word lockdown, now immediately scan yourself from head to just do the scan of what comes up, because it's going to be very subtle. It's going to be very like your arteries will like contract like a fraction of a millimeter, right? Which would raise your blood pressure like 2 points or something, right? It's very minimal, which is why we miss it. But we're constantly responding to the environment the same way that a plant responds to the environment. Now, here at my apartment, right outside is a palm tree, okay, on the 3rd floor, so I'm looking right at the top of it. But plants are constantly responding to the environment. It's not easily like perceptible, right? But I mean, it's been proven that plants over time will like turn themselves and orient the leaves in such a way that they receive the most sunlight. Okay, so if that happens over, let's say, the course of a couple days, that happened one motion at a time. It was just so slow. The human mind works a lot faster, I think, but it's equally difficult to perceive. So anyways, so there's these words that directly affect our emotional environment. So then, that's a negative example, right? I presume you had a negative reaction to the word lockdown. But let's try a different word or set of words and see if you get a positive response. So how would your internal climate change if I said the words internal order? If I said internal order. So you got to try that on and see what response you have to that, okay? Or how about this? This is another 2-word phrase. What if I said the words emotional alignment? Emotional alignment. So then get an idea of what that causes, if anything, internally for you. Then we'll take this the next step right now. So there's this concept of priming. And if you studied psychology, then you know what priming is. Priming means let's say someone tells you to focus on the color red or something, and then you notice everything around the room that is red. But there's more subtle ways that it can be done. So for instance, let's see. Well, the example that I was going to share was I was talking with my friend yesterday, right? And she was telling me about this concert that she went to, sort of like an EDM, like electronic music concert or whatever, right? And she told me, I went to this concert, blah, blah, blah. It was electronic music, and then it was trance, and then she said trance with a C, not trans, like trans, like trans fat, or trans like transgender, or whatever, like with an S, right? And I said, I know what you meant, because you primed my mind. You said concert, right? So if I hear the word concert first, or music, and then you say trance, that was done perfectly, but she wasn't aware that she did it. She actually did it very, very well, but she wasn't aware that she did it. And so I had to point out to her that, hey, your speech was perfect because you primed my mind first before uttering a word that had what is it? homophone or something, when it has two different meanings but the same sound or same pronunciation, right? A word that could easily lend itself to confusion, right? Which is a sign of a good speaker. That's a sign of an intelligent speaker, is if they'll actually intentionally, when there's a difficult word coming up or a word that could be misheard easily, and you prime the audience first by saying an associated word first, and then you introduce the second word. Anyways, I think you get this concept. So priming. So before, I've been scrolling Facebook, and there's so many emotional posts and panic posts and like rumors and stuff, like very unreasonable things, like, oh, it's doomsday, whatever, right? So what if and that in turn affects our emotional state. So let's try this priming phenomenon. So what if you were to, before you go on to Facebook, what if you primed yourself by thinking of the word lies, Lies, as opposed to truths, right? If you think of the word lies, right, lies and deception. So think in your mind, think of how many synonyms you can that to the word lies, right? There's deception, there's falsehood, falsities, right? So try to come up with like 3 or 5. Okay, I'm going to do that right now, silently. Okay, I got it. So if you prime your mind like that and then go on to Facebook, I would bet that your emotional environment has a different response than it would have if you had been primed a different way. Okay, let's do another experiment. So let's say that I want you to think of 3 words that are synonyms for the word security. So security, protection, what else? Monitoring, something like that, okay? You think of 3 words related to security. Then, if a friend comes up to you and says, or it could be a coworker, and says, uh-oh, we have a problem, right? Emotionally, you'll probably have a different response to that than you would have if you were primed with some sort of word like weak, right? Like if you, let's say you try to think of synonyms for weak. So weak, and then small, vulnerable, right? You think of these synonyms, then imagine someone coming up to you and saying, we have a problem, right? If you really felt those words, as opposed to just saying them for an exercise, if you actually really felt it, then you're going into that situation undershooting your actual potential, right? So it's all these self-help people love to say, oh, you're not fulfilling your potential, blah, blah, blah. But how about explaining the mechanics of that, the machinery of that? I think one way that this is done is through this priming effect, right? Because the world is there. The world is out there how it is, and it's not a matter of one day it's this or one day it's that. It's the world, and it's not different for different people. People just have different perceptions of it, and those perceptions are in turn products of those own people's beliefs, right? I watched the biography documentary of Tony Robbins, and that was really cool to watch. There was a lot of early life stuff on him that I didn't know about, and so that has me thinking back to beliefs and self-limiting beliefs. So to actually see that all of the steps in sequence, how it happens, I think that's very, very important, and that's what everybody should aim for. So we have this, and this is what I'm thinking about a lot this week, right? So I'm thinking that in the morning when you wake up, your mind is in a certain state, and that's going to depend on what kind of dreams you had, right? I've been really into like dream control lately, or dream, what do you call it? Controlling your dreams, and I kind of had a breakthrough at one point in this week. It was really cool, but I feel like when you wake up in the morning, your mind is in a certain role. It's whatever role you played in your dreams. So then you go into your day playing that role, and you start acting, blah, blah, blah. But it's very, very subconscious, right? Because the roles are subconscious, right? We're talking about like archetypes, and we're talking about like object relations, like how you relate to other people, like as something. Do you relate to other people as something bigger than them or something smaller than them, right? I really fleshed this out in my program, Unchained, right, which is on the Existence First website. But how you relate to the world, as something bigger than the world or something smaller than the world, right? Because everybody's out there, right? Think of all the people out there in this world, in this one world, and everybody is approaching the world slightly differently. No two people have the same exact approach. Everybody out there has their own perception of what's happening and their own approach to life. But some people are more successful because of their approach, and some people are not. Okay, I think we got priming covered. Let's do this. And we'll keep this maybe as a shorter one today. We're going to end we'll end with, I have two possibilities I need to choose right now. It's going to be about either pattern recognition or perspective changing. All right, it has to be perspective changing because that's what I put in the title for this program. So we'll go with that. Okay. So this week I was reading this book. It's called Inner Engineering. It's written by Sadhguru, who's like a spiritual guide, I suppose. And my dance teacher bought me this book, so shout out to her. But one of the ways to recenter ourselves is by gaining perspective, is by becoming aware of these parameters that surround us. Okay? So the way that we do this, there's a few ways to gain perspective. Okay, there's different types of perspective. There's time perspective, right? Which means, are you thinking about the next 5 minutes, or are you thinking about the next 5 days or the next 5 years? That's time perspective, right? Then there's geography perspective. Are you thinking about like this apartment, this apartment complex, or this neighborhood, or this city, or this county, or this state? Or are you thinking about this country? Or are you thinking globally? Or are you thinking even into other galaxies, right? So for example, how do you gain perspective in a time when things are getting like really crazy, like like people hoarding toilet paper, or even emotionally taxing things, right? Like losing a loved one, right? One way to instantly zoom out and gain perspective is by doing both time perspective and geography perspective. There's like a bumblebee outside my window. So if you were to ask, okay, an alien looking down right now at Corona chaos, what would an alien think? Or, well, here's some perspective to understand the human being a little bit better, right? So imagine two aliens looking down from outer space, and they're asking each other about planet Earth, and they're like, hey, look at that place. Like, it's kind of neat, like these the humans down there. The humans can communicate, but they use these words, and then the other person hears the word, and then they understand what the first person means, right? Like, that's kind of neat. How many organisms or species on that planet can do that? And then the other alien says, just one. And they're like, well, and then he says, well, yeah, there's actually millions of organisms on that planet. The humans refer to those organisms as animals or plant life. But yeah, but there's all these organisms, and then the only one that can talk verbally, there's only just one species out of millions, right? Just one out of millions. See, now that's a perspective shift, because otherwise you would say something like, oh, everybody knows how to talk. But that's just in the set of human beings, everybody knows how to talk. But if you think of, okay, what creatures are on this planet, right? Even a virus. A virus is like, from what I've read, it's like, it's not clear if it's like living alive, like an organism or not, because it's really just like a pocket of DNA, but it's not like a full cell, like a factory. So, but bacteria are alive, right? So they exist just as much as human beings do, right? So, but that kind of perspective will draw things out. Anyways, so the reason I brought up this book, the Inner Engineering book, is that it's talking about polio, right? So it says a variety of diseases that people believed to be God's will until 100 years ago are in our hands today. Polio is an example. The very word polio would strike terror in the hearts of many in recent history. When I was growing up, I saw quite a few polio-afflicted people about my age who were doomed to live out their lives in wheelchairs. It was a common sight, and it was acknowledged fact that they would never be able to walk in their lives. Their affliction, blah, blah, blah. Let's fast forward. At the start of the 20th century, polio was the most feared ailment in industrialized countries, paralyzing thousands of children. Effective vaccines practically eliminated this disease in the 50s and 60s. When it was recognized as a major problem in developing countries, immunization programs were introduced. In 1988, polio afflicted 350,000 children in the world in a single year. In 2013, the number dropped to 416. By 2012, India was no longer on the list of polio endemic countries. Right? So that gives a perspective, because not only world, like geographical perspective, but also time perspective. So over the course of starting, in the early 1900s, fast forwarding all the way to 2012, we see what has transpired. So, I think I'm really critical of people who promote panic and sensationalism, and I think that critique is actually catching on in this fake news movement, right? If you're not familiar, that a lot of people are posting hashtag fake news when there are news reporters filming or showing incorrect footage. Like there was one where they claimed that they were at a hospital in New York that was like overcrowded and chaotic, and it turns out that the hospital was actually in Italy, so they pretty much misrepresented, and then caused panic. Now, the reason that I'm critical of people who cause panic is that it causes other people to drastically shorten their time perspective, right? And they think only about now, right? And then they suffer emotionally until they can widen their perspective. When they widen their perspective, then they'll feel better, okay? So that's a tool, that's a technique. I started off this lecture saying that, existence first is about providing like real techniques and tools, and that's and so that's an example for it. Okay, I don't think there's probably no questions. So what we'll do is I'm going to end this, and then if there are questions, you can just type it. This will be on the Facebook to be watched as many times as you want. There's a lot of good stuff in there, so tune in again next Saturday at 2 o'clock. I look forward to hosting these in person again. That was always a fun time. So as soon as Corona chaos is over and we can leave the houses, then I'll see you at my office, and we'll keep it up then. Okay. Think deeply and put your existence first.